Welcome to Gillette Stadium, everybody. My name is Mike Petraglia. I am joined by longtime friend, associate, and colleague, the Patriots expert beat reporter for WEEI.com, Christopher Price. Chris, it's not football season, but actually it is. Early April, we've passed, or actually gotten well into, obviously, the free agent signing period. But what I want to talk about right now is looking forward to the NFL draft, which this year, for the first time, is in May. On hand here behind us at Gillette Stadium today is Johnny Manziel. Johnny Football from Texas A&M, the former Heisman Trophy winner. Let's get right to it. You wrote about it on WEEI.com. Why in the world, with Tom Brady on this roster, would the Patriots spend their time talking with Johnny Manziel?
I think there are a couple of things at play here. First of all, you get a pretty good sense of who a prospect is when you get him in for a visit like this. And so you get him in a room, you get him looking at the whiteboard, you do some advanced intel on a rookie, and you get a pretty good sense of where he is, what he can do, and what he can't do when he comes into the league. The other thing to remember here, that 4 of the top 10 teams in the draft this year play the Patriots. So there's a chance that they'll face Manziel at some point in the regular season in 2014. They want to get as much information as they can. The other thing, too, that's important to remember is the Patriots always want to do their due diligence, and I think it's very important if something crazy happens. We're not saying that either Manziel or Teddy Bridgewater, one of those guys, is going to slip, but we've seen it in the past. Aaron Rodgers is the great story. Of course, he was considered one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the draft that year, fell all the way down to the mid-20s. So just in case something crazy happens, the Patriots want to be prepared.
And oh yeah, by the way, of course, somebody by the name of Tom Brady fell to the 6th round in 2000. So let's always keep that in mind. You can many times get a bargain, get a steal in the NFL draft if you do your due diligence. And then there's the other aspect. Bill Belichick is always looking for creative ideas, and he always thinks outside the box. Who's to say that a 21-year-old with the kind of unique game that Johnny Manziel has doesn't spark something in his imagination?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think, too, it's really important to remember that when you look at Manziel was a guy who beat Alabama and Nick Saban a couple of times in college. And so, there are a lot of similarities between a Saban defense and a Belichick defense. Maybe that's one of the reasons why he has him in here. Kind of learn from him a little bit. Look, we're under no illusions that, Manziel is going to come in and teach Belichick anything. And I think Manziel is smart enough not to put all his cards on the table when you're talking to someone like Belichick, because I think he's pretty well aware he's not going to last until 29. But I think it's a good experience for both sides. It's a learning experience for both sides, and I think that's ultimately what they'll take away from it.
You mentioned another name that I find very intriguing. He had a great end of the year. That's Teddy Bridgewater. I saw the pass he made against the Cincinnati Bearcats at Nippert Stadium, and the pass that he beat UC on that day was remarkable. He was falling down off his back foot, almost on his back, and he had the kind of arm strength and the accuracy to find a guy in the corner of the end zone.
I love Bridgewater. I do. I think that if he gets into a great situation, again, I think it's similar to Manziel in that I don't think he's going to end up here, but I think if he gets into a great situation, I think he has a chance to be a very special quarterback. Look, it's a very intriguing group. I think that I've never seen a class. We always go back to the 2012 class with Luck and RG3. I think everyone pretty much assumed that those guys were going to be great. I've never seen a quarterback class that has had so many different opinions, with so many real experts. You talk about Manziel, Ron Jaworski says, he's a 3rd-round guy. There's some guys who have him in the top 5. So they're all over the map when it comes to this group, and I think as it relates to the Patriots just want to get a sense of who they're dealing with here. They want, again, it goes back to getting as much info as you can, but at the same time, you want to know who you're going to be facing or who you could be facing in 2014, 2015, and beyond.
All right, we're talking about the draft right now. Let's talk about 2 specific areas I think a lot of Patriots fans are concerned about. A, the pass rush, and B, the depth at linebacker. How are the Patriots going to go about addressing those 2 areas?
I think there are a couple of different things that you could think of. I think, first of all, the Patriots are going to be inclined, if they stick at 29, and that's the question, if they stick at 29, I think this is a really good year for young, versatile defensive linemen. There's a handful of guys out there, Louis Nix, the kid out of Notre Dame, Rashid Hageman out of Minnesota, who I'm very high on. Timmy Jernigan out of Florida State. There are a lot of guys out there who can play multiple spots along that defensive line. They're not pure pass rushers. Anthony Barr out of UCLA is more of a pure pass rusher. But there are a lot of really good, young, versatile guys out there who can do multiple things. They work as penetrating defensive linemen, defensive tackles, and they can do a really good job getting after the quarterback. So I think that's one area where you address it. I think if you're looking at linebacker depth, I think they would have preferred to address it through free agency. They had Wesley Woodyard in here, who I thought would have been a great fit for this team as a backup linebacker. There's a handful of guys on the roster now. Steve Boharnis, who remained, Dane Fletcher is going to Tampa Bay. Brandon Spikes is going to Buffalo. There's a handful of guys here on the roster now who might be able to help out, but I still think that you're going to address that linebacker depth probably in the middle rounds of this draft.
Resetting the linebacker group, of course, you're talking about Gerard Mayo coming back off season-ending injury. He'll be back. Obviously, you have Dante Hightower and you have Jamie Collins. Behind that, though, that's where I think the Patriots really have to think about the depth.
They really do. And again, I think that's one of the things that it's not a premier question, I think. You know, when you look at the Patriots and their needs going into the draft after free agency, you think defensive line, you think tight end. You don't necessarily think of linebacker depth. Again, I think that's going to be an area that they're going to address middle to late rounds of the draft.
Obviously, we talk about the questions Patriots fans have. Those are on the defensive side of the ball. Let's move to the offensive side of the ball. Like you mentioned, the depth behind Rob Gronkowski. Let's face it, okay, Chris, we know that the kind of injury that Rob Gronkowski came off of is very unusual to come back at 100%. Patriots are very optimistic he'll be ready for training camp, or at least for the start of the regular season. Let's make that clear. Will he be Adrian Peterson? I mean, Adrian Peterson came back and was the MVP. I don't think it's fair to expect Rob Gronkowski, taking the abuse that the tight end position takes, that either way he plays it, it's fair to expect him to be Adrian Peterson, but who knows? Still, the Patriots need to look at this draft and look at the tight end position. Where are they looking?
I think you're going to look at the second round. You're going to look at guys who are second and third round possibilities, guys like C.J. Fedorowicz, guys like Nicholas out of Notre Dame. Those are all guys who, it's my understanding, can step in relatively quickly and produce at the NFL level. Look, we're not going to ask them to be, you know, Gronkowski, Hernandez, those guys right out of the gate. But I think a reasonable level of expectation for those rookies, for a rookie tight end in this offense, probably 30 to 40 catches a year, you know, in working to augment Gronkowski. I agree with you. I don't think it's fair to expect Gronkowski to be Rob Gronkowski that he was, you know, second year in the league. But I think at the same time, I think there's a reasonable level of expectation there with Gronkowski where he's going to be able to get back sooner rather than later and still be a big part of the passing game.
Offensive line. Patriots bring back Ryan Wendell over center, the guy that Tom Brady, frankly, is very comfortable with. Ryan Wendell has rough spots this year. There's no question about it. Pro Football Focus had him as one of the ones who really struggle along the Patriots offensive line in negative territory over the middle of the offensive line. Where do the Patriots go in terms of providing depth along the offensive line?
There is one guy who could be a curveball for the Patriots in this year's draft. We always talk about, you know, we talked about defensive line, we talked about tight end, those areas of need. I'm hearing more and more about a kid out of UCLA, Xavier Su'a-Filo, who is really a disciple of Logan Mankins, for lack of a better term. We had a chance to talk to him out of the combine. Loves Logan Mankins. He's a versatile offensive lineman in that he can play guard, he can play tackle, he can do a lot of things. Plus, he is very, very nasty, and I say that as a compliment. Yeah. So he's one guy who could be available if the Patriots stick at 29 and they want to throw everyone a curveball. He's one of those guys they could go after as an interior offensive lineman. So there's a handful of guys out there. As it relates to this offensive line, the biggest question for me I have going forward is the new coaching. The new coaching, right. Not the new coaching staff, but the new coach in Dave DeGuglielmo. I'm going to botch his name a million times, and this will be the first time this year. I'm not even going to Dave DeGuglielmo. Close enough. He's going to be taking over for Dante Scarnecchia. He's going to be the new offensive line coach. There is no question when it comes to continuity, because you're going to be able to run the same five guys out there, and I think they work well as a unit. But I want to see how they work with a coach, how they work with the coaching staff. Bill Belichick at the league meetings talked a little bit about how Brian Dable is going to be working a little bit with this offensive line, maybe to get the new coaching staff incorporated and kind of make that seamless transition. So all of those elements working together is going to provide a lot of questions. It's going to be an area to watch this year in the offseason going into training camp.
Sammy Watkins out of Clemson is not going to be available,
obviously,
as a wide receiver. But when we're looking at the wide receiver position, where should the Patriots fans look for the Patriots to focus?
You're going to look at a mid-round guy. I think there's a chance that they could pick up a mid-round guy. I think, look, right now, this wide receiving core is pretty well set. And you look at Edelman, you look at Brandon LaFell, you look at the youngsters, you look at Tompkins, you look at Dobson, you look at that group. The guy who I'm really interested to see this year is Boyd, because we didn't see a lot of him last year, and I think now we're going to get a chance to see more of him going forward. I think he has the possibility to to play multiple spots and do multiple things in this offense this past game. He's such a physical freak, and I think we saw that a few times last year. But I really want to see how that translates in 2014. But speaking about the young guys, there's going to be a lot on their plate. They're going to be expected to make that leap that can be even more difficult than going from rookie year to year one in the National Football League. So I think right now, though, as a group, that group of wide receivers are pretty well set up. There's a skill position I think they're going to look to address. It's running back.
And where do the Patriots look in that regard?
I think you're looking at a mid-round guy. I don't think that there's a chance that they're going to use one of those first couple of days picked. I think they're going to look at, there's a chance, Andre Williams is a guy. I think Storm Johnson out of Central Florida is a possibility. Bishop Sankey is a smaller guy out of Washington who probably won't last until the third round, but he's another guy. I think that they're going to need to build a little bit more depth at running back when you talk about the loss of LeGarrette Blount, as well as the fact that both Shane Vereen and Stephen Ridley, their contracts are up after 2014. It's going to be an area of need for the Patriots sooner rather than later.
And the Patriots will get ready now in earnest. They have been, for the last couple of weeks, or last couple of months, going over scouting combines, going over all the data of the top college prospects available to them. And for the first time, the NFL draft will be held in early May. So giving the Patriots and the other 31 NFL teams a little extra time to do their homework. He's Christopher Price. I'm Mike Petraglia at Gillette Stadium, WEEI.com.